We hear a lot about the jobs that people are concerned about AI automating, but what about the roles that people think AI should do? Where are those lines? Today, we're looking at a new study that attempts to find out exactly where those lines are. Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. As time goes on and people get more acclimated to AI simply being a part of the society that we live in, the discourse has naturally shifted from high-level binaries and generics like, will AI take our jobs? Or even silly little aphorisms like, your job won't be taken by AI, but by someone using AI, into deeper analysis around where AI is actually useful, how it's evolving, and importantly, more recently, where people want AI to be involved. You might remember this study that we covered earlier this year from Stanford that divided tasks into 4 different zones based on how good AI was at doing those things and how much workers wanted them to do those things. There was a green light zone, which was things that AI was good at and that people were very excited for AI to do. A red light zone, which was things that AI was good at but that workers didn't want AI to do. A yellow zone, which was things that people wanted AI to do but where capabilities were a little bit low. And then a low priority zone, which was where AI couldn't do things or they were particularly hard and where people didn't really want AI to do those things. Now, this was super interesting to me. It's become a part of basically every keynote that I give because, again, it gets out of these binaries and starts to get into actual expressed human preferences from people on the ground who don't really have time for all these big philosophical debates. They're just trying to figure out how AI is or isn't going to be useful in their own jobs and what it's going to mean for their careers moving forward. Well, now we have something that almost forms an interesting companion study. Earlier this month, researchers from Harvard Business School took a fresh look at AI job replacement. Now, instead of coming from the angle of how capable AI was at performing certain tasks or trying to figure out how many jobs AI would replace, they instead asked people broadly how they feel about AI stepping in for humans in various occupations. In the abstract, the researchers wrote, despite cultural anxiety about artificial intelligence displacing human workers, we find that Americans show surprising willingness to cede most occupations to machines. Given current AI capabilities, the public already supports automating 30% of occupations. When AI is described as outperforming humans at lower cost, support for automation nearly doubles to 58% of occupations. In other words, where AI is competent and cheap, in many areas there isn't all that much moral objection to AI replacing humans. However, the researchers continued that there are a narrow subset representing around 12% of occupations that include things like caregiving, therapy, and spiritual leadership that remain categorically off limits because automation in those areas is seen as, in their words, morally repugnant. They write, this shift reveals that for most occupations, resistance to AI is rooted in performance concerns that fade as AI capabilities improve, rather than principled objections about what work must remain human. Now, the chart that got shared all over the internet was this one, another 4-quadrant chart. On the x-axis, we have technical feasibility, i.e. the percentage of tasks that are exposed to AI, and on the y-axis, we have what they call moral repugnance towards AI. The 4 quadrants then are, in this case, the green quadrant is in the lower right, that's low moral repugnance towards AI, and high capability, this is their no friction quadrant. Above that, in the capable but repugnant, which is sort of like their yellow light category, which they call moral friction, that's where there's high AI capability, but also high moral repugnance towards AI. Their red quadrant is where there is dual friction, low capability, and high repugnance. And their blue quadrant, which is sort of like the opportunity quadrant of the other study that we just saw, is called technical friction, where there is moral permissibility, but low capability. So let's talk about some of the types of jobs that are in each of these areas. And let's do it in that order. On the no friction side, where there is high capability and low repugnance, there are a lot of white-collar jobs. Search market strategists, financial quantitative analysts, economists, special effects artists. All of those are in the green quadrant. Now, again, I will remind you that while the other study is about what workers in those areas thought, this is about what the broader public thinks. In other words, this is the broader public looking in on other people's jobs and saying whether they're fine with those jobs being automated. It's not people self-assessing. In the next quadrant, the moral friction quadrant, where AI is capable, but there is higher moral repugnance, some of the call-out examples include sociologists, history teachers, fraud examiners, OBGYNs, legislators, and school psychologists. Basically, even if ChatGPT can theoretically give advice to students, that's not really something that people are super stoked on. In the dual friction category, where there is both low capability from AI and high moral repugnance, they have nuclear technicians, oral surgeons, bailiffs, and nannies. Apparently, even if we solve the problems of humanoid robots, people aren't willing to give their kids over to them just quite yet. And then over in the blue area, which again is sort of an opportunity area of technical friction where there is moral permissibility but low capability, they have things like semiconductor technicians, cashiers, mail sorters, gambling dealers, and conveyor operators. Of course, if you are a startup who is thinking about areas where you could vertically design AI solutions without people being mad at you, that blue area might be a place to look. Now, Eric Brynjolfsson, one of the authors of the earlier task-based study, saw this new one and made the comparison directly, saying, it's interesting to compare their chart with what we found when we asked the workers themselves what they want. Matt Bean from MIT Sloan actually ran the two studies through ChatGPT to compare, with Brynjolfsson of the Stanford Digital Economy Lab then synthesizing the analysis into a table. This new 4-quadrant chart had on the x-axis worker automation desire, and on the y-axis public moral acceptability. So for this then green light, which was high moral acceptability and higher worker automation desire, that was things like scheduling and reminders, payroll error fixes, records upkeeping, standardized reporting, and database maintenance. It will not surprise you at all, especially if you listen to yesterday's episode about where we're starting to see AI deployed. These are in these areas where there's high value to getting it automated and people very much not protective of those areas. The next quadrant, where there is public moral acceptability, they called augment carefully or copilot by default. In other words, a human using an AI is probably the way to go versus handing it over to an agent. That included things like assign and allocate stories, film editing and cuts, graphic layouts, and find a unique fact research. I think this is a really revealing quadrant. Because if you take a step back, one of the things that these studies are telling us is that workers have a higher threshold for what they want in their job automated as opposed to people outside their job. People outside of their job ask whether certain tasks within their job are okay to automate, basically are in many cases saying, sure, why not? Even though the people who are doing those jobs say that there's something important or distinct about the human touch that they want to preserve. I think that's why you're seeing things like film editing and cuts, where the people who are doing that understand what makes the difference between a really great version of that and an only okay version of that. Whereas from the public at large who doesn't know about that craft, doesn't necessarily see it as craft, they just see it as something to get done. And version A done by a human craftsperson versus version B done by a robot doesn't particularly matter to them. One of the real interesting challenges that we will face as a society is how to navigate the lines between what the people on the front lines who are doing a particular job think and where broader public sentiment is. That's that quadrant that's going to see the most of that particular question. Now, over on the other side, where worker automation desire is high but moral acceptability is low, is kind of the inverse of that, where workers who are on the front lines think that there's more room to automate than people who are looking from outside who find it morally repugnant. This quadrant they call assistive only, and included by way of example care and therapy intake summaries. Someone pointed out that this is actually one of the areas where the Harvard study shows its limitations. Matt_Emp on Twitter wrote, caregiving is where automation can make the most difference if deployed appropriately. No more elder neglect while warehoused in care homes administered by underpaid, overworked staff. And to try to interpret this a little bit, the broader public is saying, absolutely not, we should not have AI taking care of sick or elderly people. That is a job that is for humans, it is distinctly of humans, we should have humans doing that. That's the lens through which they're interpreting it. However, what this combined chart is showing is that the people who are in that role understand that there are parts of this that are absolutely and incredibly valuable to automate. As Matt points out, many of the facilities where this type of caregiving happens are plagued by the problems of, as he puts it, underpaid, overworked staff. To the extent that AI can take off big chunks of, for example, administrative work that allows them to just stay focused on the already emotionally taxing parts of human caregiving, there are probably really big benefits to be had from that. And this is, of course, why it's going to be so important to not stay on the role-level analysis, but actually get into task-level analysis. In many ways, I think that the best way to look at AI-related job displacement is from an additive task kind of level. In other words, you take it from the task level, can AI and should AI automate a particular task? And then from there, you look at what percentage of a particular role as it's currently constituted is tasks that can be automated. So instead of saying we're trying to automate role X, you instead say automation can do 70% of the work of that role. And then we get to ask at what threshold that role needs to change. Does the role stay the same, but there's just fewer of those people? Is that role rolled into another role, where the role's objectives are fundamentally changed based on the new capabilities that AI offers? That's the sort of nuanced change that I think is going to happen, much more than just job gone, see you later, which is, of course, the popular media kind of view, which we'll get into in just a minute. The last area on the combined chart is where worker automation desire is low and public moral acceptability is low, which the AI summarization calls defer study or govern pilots, but which I think a lot of people are fine pretty much leaving off of the focus area for AI right now. This is things like final hiring and firing, parole and probation risk calls, and ethics reviews and IRB-style oversight. I think that both of these studies on their own are really valuable, but I think taken together they represent something entirely different. This is actually the beginning of a map of where society thinks AI can and should be valuable, and where AI should be deployed to help move things forward. Now take that analysis as compared to another recent study that got a bunch of attention last week. That was a Senate report that found 100 million US jobs could be replaced over the next decade. The report was conducted by Democrat staffers on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Staff reviewed economic data, investor transcripts, and corporate financial filings to come up with this number. However, the main source of data was ChatGPT itself. The chatbot told staffers that AI and automation could replace nearly 100 million jobs over the next 10 years. That includes displacing 89% of fast food and counter workers, 64% of accountants, and 47% of truck drivers. Across the 20 workforces that ChatGPT said would be most affected, it said that 15 of them would see half of jobs displaced by AI and automation. Now, 100 million jobs would obviously be a catastrophic number, well over half of the current 170 million strong US workforce. Staffers did acknowledge that the methodology was a little questionable, writing, "The reality is no one knows exactly what will happen. There is tremendous uncertainty about the real capabilities of AI and automation, their effects on the rest of the economy, and how governments and markets will respond. While this basic analysis reflects all the inherent limitations of ChatGPT, it represents one potential future in which corporations decide to aggressively push forward with artificial labor." The report also noted that this change is far more rapid than previous economic disruptions, giving a greater sense of urgency. Staffers wrote, "The agricultural revolution unfolded over thousands of years. The industrial revolution took more than a century. Artificial labor could reshape the economy in less than a decade." Now, the point of the report ultimately was not to generate an accurate number of jobs under threat. It was to stir up conversation and provoke a policy response to the looming issue, something that many AI leaders have called for as well. The report recommended adopting a 32-hour workweek, increasing worker protections, a $17 minimum wage, and elimination of tax breaks for companies that automate their workforce. In an accompanying op-ed in Fox News last week, Senator Sanders argued that, quote, "The rapid developments in AI will likely have a profoundly dehumanizing impact on us all. We do not simply need a more efficient society, we need a world where people live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives." I've said before, and something that might surprise some people, that I've actually appreciated over time Senator Sanders' approach to this particular conversation. And the reason is spelled out right here in the first line in this essay. He writes, "Everybody agrees that AI and robotics are going to have a transformative impact on our country and the world. And yet I've seen in the past how when it comes to a new technology, the tendency for the side that doesn't like the technology is actually to try to strangle it in its crib before it gets out and impacts the world. Now, it may seem obvious that AI is beyond that stage, but I don't mind someone like Bernie Sanders taking the position that AI is here, it's real, and trying to bring up this conversation around what the new social contract in the context of AI looks like. I don't agree with a lot of the foundational arguments that he has about the motivations for why this technology is being created, and I don't agree with a lot of the remediations that he's suggesting. But this conversation that presumes that AI is here and that it will have an impact on real people's real lives in ways that are so significant that they could change the shape of the economy in ways that demand a new social contract conversation is something that I agree with. We've forgotten this recently, but the foundation of democratic society isn't everyone agreeing. It's everyone being able to have good faith conversations that start from some shared consensus about what reality is. So TLDR, I don't think we're likely to see 100 million jobs ripped away, but I don't mind the starting conversation being, should we nudge what we consider a full work week down to 32 hours? Now, one interesting article that I also noted from last week that I also think optimistically shows just how little we know about how this is all going to play out and why we can't make too many assumptions before we see it in the real world. Back in May, a business services company called House Call Pro surveyed 400 home service professionals in an attempt to figure out how AI adoption was playing out in blue-collar professions. They were so struck by the level of adoption that they named the report the AI-Assisted Trades Pro, How the Field is Leading the Future of Work. The survey found that 40% of these pros actively use AI, and 60% were using AI at least somewhat. The pros were using AI for content as well as administrative tasks. The pros reported saving an average of 3.2 hours a week using AI. That's 160 hours for a year for professions that are largely small business or owner operated, enough to really move the needle. When you are saving the equivalent of 4 full weeks of administrative work per year, that is unbelievably high impact. Now, in that report, cleaning professionals were the most common users, while electric professionals were the most satisfied with AI. Another big takeaway was that AI was not replacing blue-collar workers at all, even though it was delivering huge time savings. 73% of the pros surveyed said that AI had not impacted their hiring rates. Now, CNN recently covered the survey and tried to track down some of these AI-augmented plumbers and electricians. They found Oak Creek Plumbing and Remodeling in Milwaukee, who now have 20 plumbers all using AI. Company president Dan Calley said, "It's definitely been worth the investment. Some of our older guys have learned to ask ChatGPT the right questions, and they're kind of amazed with some of the answers it comes up with." He noted that the AI boost is now showing up in on-the-ground troubleshooting just as much as behind-the-scenes admin. He commented it's affecting both sides of our company out in the field and internally within our office. Another company, Gulf Shore Air Conditioning and Heating in Niceville, Florida, has implemented a fully AI bookings and request system. Once the technician arrives, they use AI to diagnose the issue and pull up the relevant technical information in seconds. The process used to mean sifting through multiple lengthy manuals searching for the right fix. Gulf Shore has also used AI to optimize their marketing campaigns, which caused a huge bump in revenue. Surprisingly then, these trade professions have turned out to be a perfect testing ground for AI. They require an immense library of technical knowledge, as well as having the experience to know the tricks of the trade. Being able to access the entire internet and every technical manual ever produced isn't a replacement for decades of experience, but boy does it help that experience figure out what's actually going on much more quickly. These trades also require a ton of tedious booking management and administrative support. Going back to that original study, is work that most workers would happily automate away. Laura Ulrich, an economist at JobSite Indeed, commented, "People go into the trades because they like doing the hands-on work itself. And if some of the administrative tasks can be automated, then that should help those workers lean into the parts of the job they like and do smarter work." Chris DeLander, the marketing and IT manager for Gulf Shore, commented, "All of our technicians are running more efficiently and they're less stressed. I feel like I'm a real-life Jetson living in the future." Now, I am very wary on this show of being Pollyannish about the real challenge that the AI transition is going to represent. As I've said before, and I will continue to say, I am extremely bullish on the long term. I think that AI is going to unlock more creation, more business, just more of everything, including more jobs. However, I think that the disruption along the way is going to be enormously painful, and I do think beyond a shadow of a doubt, it is going to be significant enough that we have to have a conversation about a new social contract and what we expect from people to be full contributors to society in a world where AI can just do much more of the work. What's encouraging to me is that between these studies and these real on-the-ground lived examples, we're starting to move beyond blithe, generic, could-be theoretical future fan fiction type scenarios and actually understand what's happening in practice and what people think in aggregate and in specific. That leaves us in a much better position to actually have the conversations we need to have to make this AI era our best one yet. For now, though, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always. And until next time, peace.